Hey, well,
Hi.
thank you for having me. This is always a, always a vibe. It's always like intriguing, always educational. Yeah, and I definitely feel comfortable. So thank you for creating this space where they can talk about topics I normally wouldn't be talking about, at least publicly, anyways.
Yay. And thank you for coming on. I want to say Happy New Year because we are in this new fabulous year, time, space. And already it's been hot and popping as we have
Yes,
seen. And
right.
just even in some of our pre-conversation, we were just talking, and I think it's worth a mention,
Yeah,
that we are in interesting times. And with that interest, it's about us staying grounded and
absolutely.
recognizing that, um, the show must go on, so to speak, even when we are dealing with some of the interesting happenings of the world. And just to shout out all of my
Mhm.
American peeps and anybody who's coming in to talk
Salute.
about this live, I
Yeah.
want to just big you up as you come on
Yes.
in. Welcome anybody who is coming on. I'm just pulling up the comment section. Please shout us out, say hello, let us know you are here so that we can be all about it with you in this conversation.
Yes.
And now, Neil,
What's
we
up?
are doing this again.
Again, we're here back by popular demand.
Right, back by popular demand. And we wanted to tackle and talk about something that I think is innovative, and yet it's an old understanding to things.
Mm,
And what actually kind of triggered this conversation was
okay.
Neil had brought to my attention a particular article. And this article is all about, it's called The New Reality of Dating Over 65. Men want to live together, but women don't,
I love that.
right?
Hmm.
And I want to just kind of touch a little bit of this article, maybe not read
Okay.
the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But this one, it starts with a young gentleman. His name
Right.
Antonio de Lafonso, and he is a believer in marriage. He
Okay.
went 3 times and was hoping for a fourth go for more than a decade. I was like, he really believes in marriage.
Yeah.
For more than a decade, a Montreal writer, Alfonso, a Montreal writer, has been dating a Toronto widow. The two see
Okay.
each other every couple of months. Al- De, Lafon, de Alfonso wanted more. He proposed 5 times, only to be rebuffed with every try. The older
Wow.
woman refused to live with him because she said she wanted to travel and be free.
Hmm.
I have to ask, and I always have to ask. So what do you want with me? He said. So the pair took a 2-year hiatus, during which Alfonso tried dating other senior age women, only to find that they too were reluctant to share a home. Even as I thought this was cute,
Mm.
Alfonso said that he cooks and he keeps a tidy house.
Okay. Because that's all you need, right? You're good to
Right.
go.
That's it. And I
All
really
right. All right.
I want to talk about this. Hi, Micah. I'm seeing that you are in the chat. Welcome and thank you for supporting. And put in when you hear that story. Let us know what you think about this space and this idea that we're really moving into a time where it's switching on how people are wanting to be in relationship. And
Yeah.
I find it interesting that when we look at the article, we're talking about people who are older, who have
Right.
actually
Yeah.
been married
Of
or
course.
been in that realm. And
Right.
there's some statistics that were mentioned here as well. It goes more than 68% of seniors more than 68% of seniors residing alone in 2016 were women. And widowhood, that's interesting.
Okay.
Widowhood was used to account for much of this gender disparity. However, now divorce is a driving trend. So the share of separated and or divorced seniors living alone has more than tripled between 1981 and 2016, according to the agency. Increasingly, it is a personal choice, not death, that sees senior age women going it alone, with 72% reporting they are highly satisfied living on their own.
I wonder why.
I want to.
What could be the reasons for this?
Right. I want to take a deep breath into this, because I've been having a series of conversations with women my age range, and we are a little more seasoned, I like to say. Most of us are 40-somethings. Yeah. And we have been married, some of us a couple of times. Yeah. Putting myself in that chat. We have been married more than once, or we've been in long-term relationships. Right. And you know, as I've been talking to my girlfriends, and even in my practice of coaching and helping couples along, I've been recognizing that there seems to be a weariness that women are showing up with. That I don't want to call it a jadedness, but maybe I'll say that it is a jadedness. That women are feeling a little bit exhausted, because, you know, my generation in particular, I think I like to call us the pivot generation. We were raised, you know, watching Dynasty and the Cosby Show. Right, so that wholesome family values, and I get you. Right? But at the same time, we were also, Dynasty would sit on the other end of that, where it was, you know, mass money and career women and, you know, going out and building all of that. And even the Cosby Show showed that. I mean, Claire Huxtable was a lawyer, and yet she had 5 kids. Right. 4 by the end. They started with 5, and then it was 4. You know, held it down though. Yeah. Right. Little thing. So we kind of believed we could accomplish all of that. You know, that you would be able to have this equal balance of being able to have your, you know, perfect partner and the perfect family and build into this career. Synergy, And many of us have done that. Like many of us have. But I question if there wasn't a toll played in that space. Right? Because there's that saying of being the Jill of all trades. But can you really be the mistress of all? Right? And I think I see some of the cracks in that space. What do you think, Neil, when you hear this article and this idea of our seasoned, more senior singles? Yeah, like I think, you know, like times have changed for sure. You know, just, you know, choices have evolved, like different ways of being have evolved. I think you nailed it when you said, you know, a lot of times women are just like exhausted and tired, you know, because they have been married and raising kids, and maybe now they have adult kids, and, you know, the empty nest. And, you know, it's like to get back into a state of like the caregiver and provider. And because like women, you know, just naturally bring that vibe and whatnot. So I think, you know, at a certain age, when you're looking at, you know, like 50 plus and whatnot, and you're just kind of in that space, it's like, you know, you maybe there's things you may want to explore, or just even enjoying that time alone that you probably never had for like 20, 30 years, right? So I think, like, when I think of from that perspective, I'm like, yo, it makes a lot of sense, you know? But on the flip side, like, I can see why like men would want that, you know, especially when you're older. When you're a little younger, you're a little more independent or whatever, but as you're older, you know, things kind of, you know, slow down. But I feel like women kind of speed up a little. But I can totally see how like a man would want to like make that like the initial, you know, thing. It's kind of like the reverse. Like when we're younger, it's like the women are like, quick, we got to get married and do this thing. But as you get older, been there, done that. It's like, hold on, man. There's a lot to explore now. You know, we got options. All right. So
So it is what it is. So, from a man's perspective, it's like, oh, you got to have a different approach. You know what I mean? Just keeping the house tidy isn't good enough anymore. You know what I mean? Because it's like women been doing that. It's like, what?
Right? So, all day, every day.
All day, every day, multitasking. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like you're not needed like that. So you better be creative with it and have something that you can literally bring to the table.
I'm loving everything that you're saying, because what I think you touched on something that is actually really imperative in the space. When you were mentioning that, you're coming into that phase of being the empty nester. And one of the things that we as couples, as you are moving through the various evolutions and stages of our lives, there's 2 points actually here that I want to bring up. And one is that every family dynamic goes through real changes. Like take for instance, when you go from being a couple to having a baby, right?
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Right?
Yes,
and then,
for sure.
There's a disruption into the way that there's a relational flow between primary intimate relationship that might have existed. You bring a baby in, a whole different focus,
of
right?
Course.
Then you do an adjustment, and in the relationship takes on a space within that adjustment, right? You guys develop new roles, and hopefully you'll be able to fortify.
Right.
And
right.
Another transition point is like when your kids go off to college and you become an empty nester space as well. Right. And depending on how you have fostered the relationship all the way through,
lots of work.
Really is going to affect that dynamic of that primary relationship that happens between you and your partner at that time. And so I think there's some real merit to take a look at that, because a lot of what happens when we look at the divorce rates that exist for us is that we get caught up in the dynamic that first of all, we live in a system which doesn't allow very much for the fostering of family. If we really are going to dissect it, I mean, women and men are away from the home a lot. When you're working a job, the children are in, we've set up provisions where children were going to school, unless it's right now. If you hear about it's now It's now January 25th. All of us who are
kind of knew that from time, but that's okay.
Right? That's another story.
That's another story.
I'm a little bitter. I got grandbabies and I'm a little bitter. Anyway,
all right.
Just rest in that space. Just take that down. From a parent, I'm feeling you. But you see what I mean? Like there's all of layers that affect how we are in relationship, right?
Yes.
And when we take this dynamic, it's very often that primary relationship falls away. And so when the kids are out of the home, who may have been your major focus, and it's just you and your husband, or you and your wife, or you and your significant other, y'all kind of just looking at each other.
Like, what do we do?
Hey, and there may not be that connection anymore.
Right.
And so taking a chance to take a value, to take a real stock of what is happening is something that I think we need to be taking a look at when that first baby is born. And when that first baby is born. My wise grandmother in Barbados, rest in peace, she's now an ancestor and passed on, but she gave me a wonderful, beautiful piece of it, well, several gems, but one pertaining to children. One, she always said, marry the man that loves you and you grow to love him, which was that may be a whole topic.
Right.
But she also always said, make sure that you and your husband make time, because she goes, your children are gonna go and grow, and you and him are till death do you part. And she goes, and that can be a long time to death, Carrie.
Yeah, no, that's real. You know, that's kind of reminds me of like, you know, the saying when it comes to like relationships, it's like this idea that you're like choosing your partner, you know, every day, like making that choice and making that intention. And, you know, that's a realization that I came up that really became present, like, you know, when I had my first child, and now I have two, and how like my time gets like so consumed like around them, and I have to like, you know, intentionally carve out time for myself, for my partner, and so on and so forth. So it's really like being intentional. And I think for a lot of, you know, couples who, you know, have children, they're just kind of moving in that flow, because it is where that becomes a priority. You can kind of lose yourself and just become like autopilot. And I think that's what happens. You fast forward 10 years, because it's been so long, like connecting on those intimate levels, it's just not there, or it's dormant rather. Like, not to say it's not there, it's just dormant. And then so I can totally see like the response. So it really, you know, it's really about taking that like intention and you know, doing it in subtle ways. It doesn't have to be major ways, but just like daily little rituals, you know what I mean? Like how we brush our teeth in the morning, you know, like just the little things that we just do, you know what I mean? So yeah.
I so agree with you. And I think bringing that to the front and center, because many times that's where, you know, I end up with couples sitting on my couch, because that is a really big space. You know, you've gotten caught up, then you come together. And one of the very first things that I will do is, because normally they'll come in and they're mad at each other, you know, and it's over foolish things, really. Those
emotions and that reactionary, like, I gotta win. Hey, man, been there, done that. Yeah.
Oh, right. We get caught up, and it may be, you know, I've had some couples sit on my couch and she, you know, she'll be really upset because she's got to remind him every week that the garbage has got to go out. And, you know, and it's really, when I dig deeper, it's really not about the garbage. It's about the fact, normally it's something along the lines of that she's not feeling seen. You know what I mean? That until she makes a bacchanal or some sort of noise about it is the only way that she can get a response. And then it becomes about forming that habit, right? Of making the noise, because we also have to take into effect how we relate to each other comes from our past understandings of things, right?
Yeah.
That's another piece of this, like how we form the dynamic of the relationship is normally based upon our old stuff. Like we talked before about those relational issues. So especially when you've been in a relationship for a while, and you've kind of settled in, and you have like the levels of kids and life and job and all of those things, it really will become prevalent when, you know, your attachment styles or the way that you've related before will show up very strongly in the space of a relationship, in the mediocrity, in your everyday, because it's not like you're able to create those real powerful moments per se, right? That make the space a real space, and in that it creates some dissonance.
Yeah. I like what you said about, you know, really understand like attachment styles. And I think that's something that doesn't come up, you know, often in relationships, at least like discussing, you know what I mean? And to me, like these are things that should be discussed early on in the relationship, like not when, you know, already, you know, hot and heavy and physical and all that. And then it's like, now we got to figure stuff out. It's like, no. And I find it's a lot easier to have them in the beginning anyways. So, you know, just to put it out there one time and then work through it, you know, and because that type of vulnerability does create the kind of intimacy that, you know, I think we're all like looking for, you know what I mean? Like creating that space, but it's hard to get there when, you know, it's not like a regular, you know, conversation or regular habit, you know, to just open up and be like, to share your insecurities or things that you're thinking about or whatever, you know?
I agree with you. And I bring it up because so many of us are not even really aware
No, for sure.
Of what attachments are. And I think maybe we spend some time and let's break down what I'm talking about. If you're listening and are on today and I'm seeing that Maria is And Colleen Sandra is welcome. Micah, you're here as well. Thank you guys for coming on and spending our time and being in there. And that idea of, Maria, I'm noticing you saying it's normally not about the garbage. Exactly. And also you were saying that someone has to be right and someone has to be wrong. Exactly. It's so not about that. Right. A lot of what we are talking about comes from those early relational spaces. And so I'm gonna break it down a little bit about what I mean by attachments. And how that normally works is we pick up our understandings of love when we are like 2 and 3 years old. So, you know, when we say that a lot of things go back to our mommy and daddy issues, for real, it normally does. And what our attachment styles are is that we are taught from a really early age how to love. And one of my, do I have it handy? I have to pull out another book.
Okay, bring up the resources. The real deal.
I don't have the book handy.
Okay.
But it's actually a story about it's John, what is his name? Not Goodman. I'll find it. But he talks about attachment styles, and he recognizes them as people who are islands, who are waves, and anchors. And if you are an island, I love how he puts this because it just makes it simple. If you are an island, you know, you're probably someone who likes your alone time, you know, who were raised by parents who valued, you know, making you independent. They valued, you know, making sure you understand how to stand up in the world. They showed you love a lot of the time by maybe giving you things, right? That was kind of their way of demonstrating it. They may not have had a lot of time to be in your space, but, you know, they did, you know, give you some of that. However, you might have been wanting to be, you know, expressions of love, shown those expressions of love, and they may not have been able to meet that need. So there's a part of you that starts to shut that down. You really are fiercely about, you know, kind of being independent, and you may not be like a demonstrator of your emotions very much, right? So that's an island.
I can definitely relate to that, you know, a lot of aspects for sure, most definitely.
And then there's identify as a wave.
Okay,
and
tell me about waves.
Waves are just that. Waves are people that kind of may do a lot of this. They may go a little bit up and down. And when you are a wave, you are someone who might have had like your family background. You might be a little more anxious in the way that you love. Like you're the person that wants to get the text message, you know, right? Where, you know, you want to know where your partner is. You're the person that needs to hear "I love you" left, right, and center, you know? Right. You're really into demonstrations of love. You like the, you know, take me out on the dates, you know, sit beside me and let's do the Netflix and chill. If your partner's late calling you sometimes or connecting with you, you might not be happy about some things, right? And it makes you nervous. It's one of those spaces, and you may get way. You're expressive in letting people know that things might get way, right? About the way that you love. So that's a wave. And an anchor are people who are, you know, had very balanced understandings. Normally they're pretty level, you know, they were given equal parts and equal showings of love and you know, enough safety to be able to go out and explore. That's the difference between anchors and waves. Waves may have had parenting that might have been a little more insecure or a bit rigid. They may not have felt safe all the time, whether it was that their parent may not have been available, or emotionally or mentally there could have been some abuse involved in that case. Anchors kind of just are level, they can feel out themselves and resource very well. They're willing to talk through when they're having in conflict and in relationships. It's kind of a smooth space for them. So
it also relates too, so yeah.
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
And the thing is, most people flow through some of these spaces.
Makes sense.
You can be like with anchors in particular, one of the things that happens with them is that they might have been ones when they were 2 and 3 years old, reaching out and trying to get love, right? And in that space, they might not have gotten it met. So what they do is they just, give up. They no longer reach out per se, and they kind of learn to like numb the space. So for anchors, they may desperately want to feel and have that expression of love,
for sure.
but just can't. They don't even subconsciously, they don't even know they want it, right? So they come up as kind of aloof, right? With waves learned it almost the opposite. So a wave is a person who, might have wanted to be loved and showed up, and the way found out really quickly. I know my mom would vouch for this so big. They learned that they could throw a temper tantrum. I was bad for that for her.
Okay.
I don't know if that's true, but that's what I've been told. That you would throw a temper tantrum, or getting really loud got you the attention, and so you begin to associate that with how you love. So those people, and the interesting thing is anchors attract both, but anchors normally anchor with other anchors because they don't want to necessarily deal with the topsy-turvy stuff.
Yeah, keep it smooth.
Right? They want smooth.
Right.
Islands and anchor and
waves
attract each other quite a bit in their dynamics. Right?
I can see that.
And it can be a triggering space where conflict starts, right?
Okay, right.
A wave is going to cause her bacchanal or their bacchanal or his bacchanal. And the partner, the other side, they may retreat, right? So it becomes this dance. And a lot of trauma actually can be imposed in those spaces in between that, as we are sorting out the way that we're in relation. So it becomes a thing that shows up over the course of being in a partnership. And if you are not in awareness of it,
See, that's which a lot of people are not. Can
you imagine what happens when now suddenly the kids are out of the house, or the job has switched, or we're all working from home? How many marriages I've seen my roster blow up because of this space.
Really?
Well,
I mean, not really. Yeah. Okay.
Right? There's nothing more surprising than when you gotta look at them every day. There's a lot of resourcing that happens when we're outside of the space. And now, everybody's in close quarters. So it's us now having to do the work now. Now we are really having to figure out, how do we work through this? Like, are you aware of what you are, Neil? Like, what kind of resonated the best with you when we talk about this idea of being a wave or an anchor?
I think like the island resonates like the most for me. I do, especially when you mentioned that like the island attracts like the waves. Yeah, 100%, for sure. But I also do resonate with like the anchor as well, just like that kind of like smooth, calm, and the openness to like discuss things and whatnot. So and you know what, like I can say that I might have like a splash of waves, but like, you know what I mean? But I think like island is the one that really resonates with me the most.
And I think that that's a beautiful, beautiful thing, because what happens is, once again, we can flow between it. And when you're in awareness of what you kind of maybe resonate the most with, we can really work on creating those stop gaps, those ways of being in the more anchored space, right?
Right.
And it sounds like you've done a ton of self-work over, the
years of work. This is not an overnight thing, man. That's for sure.
Right?
Yeah, still working.
We're always all working.
Right.
We're always all working, and I celebrate you for
appreciate it. Thank you.
that, right? Because it really matters. And I also think that it's a really good thing to be in the awareness, to be willing to work in the patterns, but to be open to different ways of being in partnership. Like I am in a 17-year relationship with my spouse, and we have not lived together for 10 years. It's been 10. It's been more years. We lived together for 7, and in those 7 years, I mean, I truly can say, when we add up all the amount of time we spent, because we lived and worked together.
Okay.
I think maybe out of 7 years, and I'm being generous, I would say maybe 12 weeks, were, and I'm talking all time. Like I'm talking just like, him going out, coming home, vacations, like I'm talking all the time. We only have maybe 12 weeks, 3 months of time that was not spent together out of 7 years. So we were like, you know what I mean?
We're tight,
with its benefits and not, I think so. As I look back now, I recognize there was a lot of codependence in that space. But we have now lived apart for 10 years, and it's been a very unique, way to have the relationship. And actually, interestingly enough, I think we're beginning to get into talks again about how are we going to kind of maybe bring the pieces back together, even a little closer. Like, could we cohabitate again? And for me, I'm like, well, if that's to happen, I think it will be a whole separate wing. Like I'm not even joking. He gets his own kitchen, definitely you get your own kitchen and your own bedroom. Like I like the idea of you visiting my bourgeois, and I, get to visit yours. But I like my whole bed space. I really enjoy my sprawl. I like to sprawl out. Right. So those things are a part of it, and a lot of people, when they hear that, think that it's really unusual. But it's really worked for us in a lot of ways. Like we are still so passionate,
Yes.
Like it is such a, he looks at me, it's been 17 years, he looks at me and I look at him, and it's still on,
Right.
we're
So like, would you say, like in this case, like, like a bit of the distance makes the heart go fonder and whatnot, what have you? Like,
I can't even imagine. Like, I honestly definitely believe that has been one of the real pluses to it. We see each other normally 3 times a week, that would be our average. And it's just enough,
Just enough, for their independence, but then still to be together. Yeah, I get that.
Right, and when he gets on my last nerve, I can
you already know. It's like, with all due respect. Yes.
And I find that with the distance, it's really created a space for us to have to talk things out. To have to spend that time, right? Figuring out what is happening with us. And I don't recommend it for everybody, and I'm not saying that is the only way, but I really related. It resonated for me when we read this article and we were talking about, you know, what that truth can look like. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I'm, you know, I definitely feel that, you know, people need to focus on like what works for them. Like you can really customize like the relationship, and it requires, I think, just a lot of like, you know, dialogue and really, you know, speaking your truth of like what your needs are and your boundaries. You know, so many times I feel we enter relationships without making those boundaries clear, and then we get ourselves in these situations that we didn't really sign up for, but then now it's like we're here. It's like you invite someone over and like, you know, they were only supposed to stay the weekend, and all of a sudden it's like, you know, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 months, and you're just, and then at that point, like you don't want to like punk somebody off. So then you're just kind of, I guess the person's I guess we're gonna roll with it. And then, you know, so but like I said, like I think it's really about, you know, having that conversation and doing what works for you. And I feel that if you're with a partner that like respects you and that loves and cares for you, like they will adjust, you know, because your peace and your happiness, you know, should be a priority, you know, like whether it's with or without that person, you know. So I like what you said when y'all live together and then realize, okay, you know what, let's try something else, and to be open to that, because I think sometimes like couples get scared, you know what I mean? Like how did that conversation even come about? You know, was it like, you know what, like I got to be out, I love you and all, but I need my space. Like
for us, it was an interesting thing. Actually, what it was is we are a big blended family. There was between myself and my spouse. And I think this is a story worth telling, because these are the other thing, like as we redefine how family structures work, there are layers, right? Yeah. And so we were a big blended family. We had 7 children between the two of us. And very much both sides of the family, both sets of children had residual underlying traumas and dramas that at the time that we got together, we weren't very aware of. Like we went into it, you know, we were all in love, me and him. And I always thought we were going to be the Brady Bunch +1, right? That was, they had 6, we had an extra 1. But what we found was that what really set it off was one of my daughters got pregnant, became a teen mom, and one of his sons got into a major thing at school where he caught a case and some charges were laid. And we realized that the respective set of children weren't doing well, and they knew it.
That would do that for sure.
So for us, we had to separate them at that point. We realized that they needed us more than what was happening. And it was a great choice in the long run. Both sets of children are now mostly grown. And out the house kind of thing. And that focus allowed us to create space for them and give the attention in the proper ways. And it also was about like a reckoning for us to have to sit down and take a look at what's happened with us.
Take away all the filters and all that and just get down to like the naked truth
of what it is. And we've had to unravel, like really had to unpack a lot of what happened during that time. I'm just reading quickly in the chat. I'm seeing that Colleen, you're mentioning that I feel like maybe I'm the anchor, if I'm understanding you correctly. I'd love to know, put in the chat what you think you are, if you're an anchor, a wave, or if you are an island, if you want to put it in there. And then Colleen, you also mentioned that's what happened with Dre and I. He stayed the night and never went home. It did last 11 years, but wow, it was an up and down ride. And ain't that the truth, right? It's not the space of how we show up in relationships. And with us, it was kind of that same almost idea. We were madly in love. And in that space, it was easy for us to be consumed in it in ways that those our children we thought were doing okay, but you know, there ain't no rule book with the parenting thing. And
so true.
Right? You try your best, but you bungle. So we had to correct. And with that, we've had to figure out new ways. We had to figure out new ways to be in relationship with each other as our children were going through that. Right? So that's how that came about. And then, if I'm honest, probably the last couple of years, though, you know, we just like it now. we both like it.
It's certain keeps things like young and fresh, and you know, you have like your structure, it's organized, it sounds like there's a flow, so and it works for you, you know.
And I think, you know, from that there's been such beauty, because once again, you know, there's been a lot of healing of our senses of who we are, and looking at these attachment wounds, because we both came out of spaces of trauma, right?
No doubt.
And how even we formed the relationship. And he's definitely an island. Major island.
Like major.
Right, down in the Pacific, like
right.
Okay. And I'm definitely a wave. Okay. And so it's taken some time for us to figure out how, and take, for example, some quick tips with that.
Bring it on, man. Bring it on.
Right? Some quick tips if you're dealing with, if you're an island, and if you're in the middle of midst of an argument. This is one of the things that we've learned through our stuff has been really, when you're a wave, we would have an argument. Let me take it here. Me and him would have a disagreement, and I can get loud. And
okay, let him know.
I will own that. I have to be there. And but what really underlines that anger and that bravado has been that I am desperately afraid that he's going to leave me. And so it's about the abandonment thing, right? That
I get that. Right.
Now, for waves, for islands, when they need to relate in the relationship, right? Or they need to resolve conflict, a lot of the time they need to separate. They do need to go so that they can take
guilty as charged. Absolutely. I'm definitely an island then. That's what's up.
You need that moment, right? To process to pull down their anger. So what happens though is, if they need to retreat and I'm afraid you're going to leave me, that becomes an instant moment of contention. So what you can do as the island, as kind of maybe being a little bit more in the space of being level-headed, is if and when you are getting to that point where the triggers have begun, take this moment to say, look, I need to go. But I'm going to only take 15, half an hour, I need an hour, whatever the time span feels like, and just state it. In the middle of that argument, state it. And then as the wave, when you become into awareness of that, it's about then figuring out your resources. Whether, for me, what works is that I will do like breathing exercises. I actually have like a mantra where I write down, I know he loves me, I know he loves me, I know he loves me, I know he loves me. And I'll be like, okay, you go, right? And then recognize that you set the time to come back into the space. Even if you don't talk. Like, cause sometimes, you know, you may take that half an hour or that hour, but it's still, you're still a vex, right? And that's okay. But it's the motion, it's the motion of you coming back. And saying, I did what I said. And that is what it is. When you are, right, to be able to kind of sate what that initial anxiety is, because the fight is normally not about whatever the actionable thing was, right?
So true.
It's really about feeling into those deeper wounds that we have. And why we even attract the people that we do is all about our relationships are about healing those early wounds, right? So my thing is that feeling of abandonment. And because of that, how he can soothe and take care of me in that moment, because that's what I'm really looking for, is when he says, I'm gonna go.
Right.
And then he gives me the time. He'll be like, look,
That's very important. I feel,
right?
yeah.
And he comes back when he says.
Yeah. And I really like the fact that you said, you know, to come back and even just to be silent. I think that's also very important too. You know, because sometimes, like you said, you're still vexed. You may not have all the right like ways you want to deliver your message at that point, but just to come back and to be in the same space. And like, I'm a big fan of silence. Like silence is never like awkward to me. I think it can be really powerful in many ways. So just like hearing that, I'm like, yeah, that definitely resonates, and I think that's cool. And then when the conversation needs to continue, then you know it's in a better space. That's understanding, because both spaces were respected. Like the wave respected the island for taking the time, and then the island respected the wave for coming back and saying that, like stating that. So I think that's a major takeaway. That's big.
It has been a work in progress for us.
It is, yeah.
Right? Always.
Right.
But it definitely, I can vouch that it does work. And one of the things he also normally does when he comes back now is doesn't just come back and start with the silence. He'll come back, he'll say to me, I love you. Or he'll be like, I'm back. I need a minute. I'm going into, the bathroom. And that helps. He acknowledges me.
That's what it is, the acknowledgement. So that simple communication of acknowledgement. It's like, I may not be ready to talk, but I'm here. I acknowledge I see you, and just, bear with me kind of deal. So I like that. That sounds really healthy. And I think that's the foundation that create, vulnerability and intimacy. But this kind of goes back to like, the original like question as to like, why would people take breaks, like in their marriage, and what is the reasons for that, and I think there's a variety of reasons, so, I know for me, like, and, when I think about my life and the times where I've been in break mode, it has always been about me finding myself, feeling like I'm lost. I don't know. I don't have like a focus really, and I just feel like I'm losing touch with myself, and taking a step away is my way to kind of like reconnect without the influences of things that are happening around me, and sometimes that takes time, right? Because I think it's really important that we know ourselves and how we show up in relationships, and as opposed to just kind of just rolling with it. So I mean, that's one reason, but I know there's others, but I know having that conversation and then actually doing it can be a difficult thing, and could be a devastating thing for someone. Like I know for some people, hearing taking a break, it's horrible. It's like it's personalized, like it's like they did something personally, and this is why, like, something's wrong with me, that's why they have to take a break. When in reality, is in my experience, just based on my own personal experience, it's far from the truth actually.
I love this because you're exactly right. We have defined the idea of relationship, meaning that it's this conjoining of two people, two personalities, two lifestyles. And yet when we look at it in that way, what often happens is you get lost in the space of it, right?
Yes.
So it's healthy to be able to examine and sometimes look at the way that we're in love with our partner, and reevaluate that this idea of love, meaning that we must possess the person that we love.
Yes.
It is really about, I believe, in my experiences, I've moved through some very different phases of our relationship. It is about being able to offer up a real safety container for my partner to be the very best person that he can be, right?
Peace.
That it's loving him enough to be in his fullest expression. And that may mean that he needs space to develop what that looks like. It doesn't switch the love between us.
Yes.
And in fact, when I have deepened that space with him, I have found that the level of respect that we show for each other has just been so much deeper. Like, honestly, and I know this, I'm saying it because people think I'm crazy, but I'm going to say it. If I was to get a phone call today from a woman or somebody who said that he was cheating on me, I would laugh. I would absolutely, it would not even be something I would fathom. One, because we have an open relationship. It would more be like, seriously, why aren't you sharing? And that would be a thing. And two, just there's no room in our space why he wouldn't have to, why he'd have to take that and lie about it. Like there's no room.
Bring it to you one time. Yeah.
And that is because of the deepening that we have shared. And in fact, I know because we have it, there's no desire. There's nothing that's forbidden in that space.
Exactly.
That we are supposed to interrelate to each other. I know there's distance, right? I know we're not together often. Those things may come up, but what I'm valuing is that we have a space where we can talk about that honestly and see how can we, what does each of us need to meet whatever that need is in that.
No, that I think that's beautiful, because like oftentimes like when people like, you know, like deceive and cheat and whatnot, because they feel like restricted and they need to like, you know, escape or whatnot, you know. But and again, like this is, you know, like not everyone would agree with these approaches, and that's fair, you know. But for some people it could be an option, just like being real and honest, you know. And I think when you create space for being like real and honest, like that's how you connect or you know, attract authentic relationships and authentic ways of being, because now you don't have to pretend, like you are who you are, you know. And that way again, like you can attract like the right people in your lives as well. So
celebrating you for that. It's very real, and I'm just noticing Win, hello. I'm so glad to see that you came and showed up. And she mentions that she's got in here, my problem is coming back from taking a break. I always don't know where to begin. And that is a challenge spot.
Yeah, that's real.
I can feel and witness you in that way, because honestly, over the 17 years, I won't say that it's not been without being rocky. And even in this space, like, there's been some new developments for us over the Christmas vacation, where we're actually talking about cohabitating again. And you know, there's some things there. There's
right.
Things. And what I recommend is that you keep it open. It's really coming from that vulnerability of saying, wow, I don't know where to begin.
Right.
You know, I'm not sure how and what this is going to be looking like, but offering it up as genuinely as we can, and being open to the idea of this, of independently loving, you know. We don't have to love, you know, there's
doesn't have to be possessive,
right? Love is kind. I always look at that songs that was read at my first marriage. And notice I said first. You know, the song that says love is kind, love is gentle, love does not possess, I think is one of them. And I think if we can kind of emulate that, because it's changing the programming. We are a society that is really based, as we talked last time about Disney and how Disney has ruined some things, like this idea of the prince or the princess coming and you know, you love forever. There's elements of almost possessing a person in that space. But I think as we are noticing, as we are evolving, as women are becoming much more autonomous, and you know, last time we were talking about traditional roles, this idea of role switching. I think we have to start examining the way that we sit in relationships in these very different ways. That also the notion, which I think is interesting, as I've mentioned, I've been married 3 times, and that in itself is proof that you can love somebody and you can have more than one love in your lifetime.
Absolutely.
And I will dare to say that you can have more than one love in a lifetime, and maybe at the same time. Because sometimes you never stop loving that person
For sure.
that they might have been with before, right?
For sure.
It just has gone through an evolution. And I believe that there's some value in us looking at that. I believe there is a lot of value in recognizing that we don't have to be restrictive in the ways that we love. And in fact, I would offer, Neil, that if we opened ourselves up to the ideas of being able to love fully and selflessly, we'd be in some very different positionings with the breakdowns that we're seeing happening even in the United States.
Right.
Seeking each other for our
Right. That's beautifully said, man. That's so true right there. Yeah.
And I think, Neil, I just love when we have these conversations. You are so brilliant, and you always, hold this beautiful space. And I value every opinion that you bring, your energy. Tell our peeps all about you. How can they find you? All of those things.
Okay. Well, on social media, you can find me at Logic 416. So that's Logic with a K, LOGIK 416. That's all my social media handles, like Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and so on and so forth. You can check out Stolen from Africa, SFA's The Movement, stolenfromafrica.com, stolenfromafrica.org. It's also our nonprofit site, so you can see what we do in the community. And we out here,
Loved it. Thank you for the share. And I'm just going to hit up. I just saw Colleen, you just put in the chat as well that you've lived common law twice. I love those men, but I'm not in love with them anymore. And that is a very valid thing, Colleen. We all can evolve through. And that's why I love that word evolution. Every experience of being in love allows us to transition and change it up. Like, I know for me, I still have like an affection for my very first love, but it's definitely not, a space I could even see myself in again. But there's always that affection. He gave me two beautiful children, right?
Absolutely.
And so, that's a love that evolved and is different. And I really do believe we're in those spaces.
Yeah, it's just like the saying where like energy doesn't die, it just changes form, really, So it just looks a little different, but it's still there, right? So.
Yes, and I so agree. And when you mentioned too this, I feel like not many people understand being real. And I think that's why these conversations are so important.
Because of fear, like it's so hard to be real when you might be judged or shamed or, made to feel guilty, for your expression or expressing your truth. You know what I mean? And or the fear of like, you're going to hurt someone's feelings. So I'm going to suppress this part of me and just hold it in the corner there. And then whatever, but then that creates something else. But yeah, a lot of it is fear, or maybe your partner said something like, man, if you ever suggest that, like, I would go crazy. And it's like, oh, I better not say that. Then, like, you know what I mean? So like, it becomes this like protective factor, but when you're in a relationship and you can't be authentic and be your full self, like it will, show up in dysfunctional ways. You know what I mean? Like there will come a point where you just feel silence. You feel like you just can't breathe. And then you have to find, ways outside of your relationship. You know what I mean? Like, you may find someone else that you can open up to that's like not your partner. And then that goes where it goes, you know what I mean? So,
I think we're talking about that cautionary tale, and we just hit 8 o'clock, and just give us a lavish space with this. Thank you, Neil, for bringing that up, because what I would say is, if you're going to take any gems from this conversation, it is, as Neil said, keep talking, keep yourselves together. Keep yourselves recognizing that you have some stuff that you brought into the space of the relationship. And that if you are in awareness of it, you can really deal. And that it doesn't have to look like every other relationship, but it doesn't mean that what you and your partner share isn't authentic.
Yes.
And with that, I bid you a good night, Neil. Thank you once again for joining me in this space.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me. Let's do it again.
We gonna do it again.
All right,
now.
Let's do it.
Thank you. Thank you. Until I meet you again. So you guys, everybody in there, please put your final comments and thoughts in. I will be hitting up that chat. I'm sure Neil will be hitting up the chat as well. Let's keep the conversations going. Feel free to share this. We want this word to get out that love is and can be in any of its greatest forms. Thank you all for coming out. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Yes. Peace.
Next time.
All right. We got this.
Right? Bye.